Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 277. Fast track your culture building. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. Taxed as always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
Tired as recently, I am Michael Miller. And I find today's episode ironic because you want to fast track culture building, and that just seems a weird thing coming from a person who has no culture.
Oh, I know. That's why I have to make it up. It's like most things. I can make up words to make myself be better because they're new words.
So the past week has been pretty crazy. I was at Awake. I have been back and forth on first and second shift. I am so tired today. How are you today? How was your past week, man?
My past week has been trying to get caught up a bit with the end of tax season, and then my mom, who's been ill, came out to visit Eric.
Did you mention the negative and then positive adjustments in your mom's
I believe
status?
I have. For those who don't know, my mom.
Do you want to mention it?
Yeah.
Okay,
For
go
those
ahead.
of you who don't know, because I know some of you do know, my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which is a very aggressive cancer. And last September, I think it was the end of last September, she was diagnosed terminal, and which was very sad. And then with months to live. And now you're sitting there going, wait, this is April or May. I have no idea what day this is. This is May now.
It just started May, yes.
And my mom came out. Her last cancer scanning came back clear, which has all the doctors baffled, and I like them baffled. And who knows, it could be short-lived, and it could come back with the vengeance, the next time she gets a scan. But this is well past months, in my opinion, and to get a clear scan, to come up and have to purchase my mom another Mother's Day card was actually the most enjoyable year to do that. So
that's really nice. A
little miracle there in the World Builders Anvil family, and we take all the miracles we can get.
Yeah, I've been very worried about your mother because I know you guys are close, and I know that what we all will have to face as an inevitability is going to be hard. And I was worried that it was going to be sooner rather than later based on how you had been talking. So when you called me and told me that, hey, by the way, she's cancer free, I was like, holy crap! Wow, great, awesome.
Well, the fact I told you just sort of shows how bad it bothered me because I was a mama's boy until I got married, so, it was very tough. I mean, it's like there's an interview episode if you want to have a lot of fun. I don't know the episode. I'll try and find it and throw it in the show notes here. About, very cool country woman who luckily I could convince to love fantasy and science fiction and kept me in books for years. Then she stopped sending them. It was very rude.
Mom, where's the literature?
I haven't had a new book in months. Yeah. So, but enough of miracles. We'll have to do, we're going to have to skip new members. We got flooded with so many, did not have a chance to write them down over the past week.
In all fairness, I am usually the one that writes them down, but I've barely had a chance to
get up at this point.
I haven't gone food shopping. Our fridge is like empty. Sarah was shooting me messages last night. She's like, "Do you mind if I order out?" I'm like, "Yeah, honey, go for it if you need to." Yeah. I'm like, order enough so that you can get 2 meals out of it if you have to. And she's like, "I'm so hungry, I don't know if that's possible." And then I talked to her later, and I'm like, "So what did you eat?" And she's like, "Toast." I'm like, "You didn't order anything?" And she's like, "No, I just dug around with stuff." And that's actually not what she had that night, but the prior night, she's like, "Last night I had toast for dinner." I'm like, "Baby," I'm like, like, shoot me a list because right now it's for me right now it's 10:30 in the morning, and normally on this second shift I'd be asleep and just about waking up about now, which gives me plenty of time between now and 3 p.m. to do some domestic stuff. So I'm like, give me a list. I'll go get some food so that we can have some food in the house because it's a little ridiculous right now.
What do you want? That's always the tough part.
Right. Well,
Okay.
the big thing is like I just don't want her to be eating junk or not eating because her schedule is taxing right now as well. So
yeah,
need to keep up that nourishment.
Yes, you need the energy to do the things that you use the energy on. Yeah.
And today, that's culture building.
That is culture building, and I'm not going to go a lot into frameworks here, but frameworks are my idea of essentially pattern building. Instead of constructing everything you need, just understand the patterns for certain things. And I want to talk about cultures because culture is something that really interests me. And for our duel, actually, I took a couple proto Earth-based cultures, and they're actually protocultures on my world as well too. And it's explained in the mythology, which I don't want to get into here. And I have in previous episodes, so go back and listen to all the episodes, and you'll get tidbits of it here or there.
So a lot of this stuff we have talked about a bunch of times before, but in case since we do have like new people, do you want to just briefly explain what a framework is?
Yeah, so it's the idea that you're building a pattern, so you can recognize and understand what a culture or a race or something is without having all the details. But later on, when you need to add details because you need them to present them to the people interacting in your world, they can stay consistent. So it's a quick way to build out something that you can understand and visualize to use instead of having to go through a checklist of 5,000 things that you need for every country, and you have to build out every country, and you don't need all that stuff. The idea is, and we talked about this before, is think of world building as creating a stage for someone. They're only going to look at it from one direction at one point of time. So when the curtains open, it needs to feel immersive and real to them. And there's a bunch of stuff on the sides that are connected to it and even maybe behind, but they're really only holding together what is currently being looked at. So it's the idea where you can get to a really complex world without having to create literally like 500 countries. There might be 500 countries in your world, but you don't.
And there might be. And you might have a list of 500 countries, but you have not sat down and created the culture, history, and how the people think on every subject.
Essentially, the closer they get to the stage, the more information you know about them, and then you reveal what you want the audience when they're interacting with your world. So one of the things is I like to talk about, what elements do I like to look at, the long of it is culture is a really complicated thing anyway. People have different opinions on, and really even what that means. These ideas of a culture group, which is kind of what I'm talking about here, not so much a culture. When I usually use the word culture, I typically mean an ethnicity.
I tend to lean in towards culture club myself.
Culture club, yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
You little chameleon.
Okay. Moving on.
Okay. So, the idea is a culture group is where you have these shared ideas, but when you get isolation, when things separate, they start to change and look different. On Earth, just because it's so well documented because of all the writing, the Indo-European, you can look at, and it stretches all the way from Bangladesh to, the north of Scotland. And so you have very distinctive people with very distinctive languages, and which on the surface, if you just look at, a quick flash of details, you would not understand that they are genetically, linguistically, and culturally divergent from a single point, probably somewhere Middle Asia. And when they spread out, the shared experiences stop. So the thing is, there's certain things I like to look at for cultures in general. And the idea is, there are 5 big things you have to look at. And if you build a culture group, the neat thing is you could deviate it from a specific point so that there are connections and you don't have to necessarily rebuild everything. And you might not always want to do that because it's always good to have like unique alien things mixed in there. But, if you're building a world, typically if they're on the same area, a lot of times, even if the cultures seem different, they're not as different as you think. German to Polish is not as deviant as you would think. Hearing the languages sound completely different. But there are a lot of similarities, and the further back in time you go, the closer they start to appear to each other, because the closer you get to the point where they were connected as with same language and the exact same shared beliefs and experiences. But there are 5 things that I really like to look at when I look at a culture group, and these are the things I start with. And remember, when you're building a framework, you're not putting in details, you're not having huge descriptions. Create a pattern, at least 3 things that are true of it. So the first one I like to look at is language. I'm not building out a proto language unless I want to. The idea is, when I'm building a language for a culture group, I'm thinking about, okay, how in general do they speak? Do they speak verb, subject, object, verb, subject? You have 3 basic things with particles in language: subjects, verbs, and objects. Do they use them, and in what order? The more those things deviate, the more different the languages will appear. They don't have to be the same when you develop the languages, but it gives you a core of where they came from and reasons for them to change. So I like to think, how do they speak? Because it sort of implies to you the order of importance. A culture that really focuses on action might throw the verbs up front. The subject might be the last thing if the individual is not that important. So you can draw some philosophical inferences from this as well too, and really, because language is built off of what the beliefs are.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, language is a reflection of the beliefs, and probably the most apparent. Things that are less important change more quickly. But we're not going to get too much into language here. But the idea is, think of just, at least 3 things that tie the language together. Maybe they have really long, bulky words. Maybe they have a bunch of short little particles. So you have short words with, a bunch of like a B, little 1 or 2 letter words sort of mixed in, because they don't have prefixes and suffixes attached. They keep them separate. How do they, how are adjectives worked with? Just basic language stuff that's interesting to you. I'm saying things that are interesting to me, but just come up with a couple things that are important overall. Because remember, this is in and of itself, you might use as the basis for all the languages if you create them. And if you don't create them, it does tell you a bit how the people think. The next one is, and I probably should have done this in a different order, so I'm going to skip to the most important one: the shared beliefs and norms.
Oh, I thought the next one was going to be about me, since it was the most important.
No, that's not even listed.
But hero worship isn't there?
Well, that could be a shared belief or norm, but of you, probably not.
So then I am the next one.
But shared beliefs are the environment they live in, the types of foods that they eat. What are some patterns there? How do they, how important is hospitality? How they treat people they've never met before? Do they lean xenophobic or xenophobic, or xenophilia or xenophobic? I guess
I was about to say, are those kind of the same thing?
Yeah.
Xenophobic or xenophilia is what you meant to say.
Yeah. And so the idea is, are they typically curious when they meet something new and want to learn more, or do they shut it out? And the way I think of it is, how they deal with people might be how they deal with plant life or new animals. They might be very slow to spread because they're very focused on hunting a certain thing, and they'll only move to areas where that thing exists. Or maybe they're always curious, so they're always out picking and prodding and finding something new, in which case they spread out quite quickly. And when they spread out, that's when they start to deviate from each other. So, but I like to think about, how do people behave towards each other, and what do they believe in? Do they, do the stars, are the stars important to them, which leads them to mathematics? Is the thunder and storms come out of nowhere and cause tension, within the people, and that's something they need to explain to themselves, which is why you can find thunder gods, everywhere from Northern Europe down to the Hindu realms, because Central Asia, storms can roll out of anywhere, much like they can inside of any landmass. So what are the things that are important to them? Was flooding a big problem? What are the types of things that they need answered for themselves, which creates a core beliefs? Because what you'll see between cultures that have similar base beliefs, when they have a pantheon of gods, they typically have very similar gods. And the longer they're around, the more gods that get added in to deal with, every scenario possible until, of course, you get to Jeff God of Biscuits. Which is always the most important god of any pantheon.
When did the biscuits thing come into play?
Jeff the God, it was, who's the comedian? No Flag, No Country. Oh my goodness. I love him and I can't think of his name right now. There was
it comes back to you mentioning.
There was a comedian who essentially, I remember he labeled himself the action transvestite, and he did a lot of history.
Eddie Izzard.
Eddie Izzard, thank you. And he made the joke, Jeff got a biscuits, which, if you know me, I'm from the Midwest and I love biscuits and I get them when I get a chance, because where I live now, biscuits aren't a very important food item. So when I get a chance, I get them. But all my friends where I live know me as a biscuit lover. So then when Eddie Izzard is out there talking about Jeff got a biscuits, my wife and the friends who saw that with me, it just becomes a good referential thing to me. Well,
also that I don't know that we've probably mentioned it once or twice that your nickname at the gaming table forever was God, because obviously if you're running a game, you are the God in that world. So like everyone for the longest time, like when we first met each other, like you were
introduced. I was introduced as God.
I don't know if I was introduced as God, but people definitely said, like, everybody called you God, and that was just the bit.
Well, because Jim Six, it drive back to a philosophy discussion me and Jim Six had back as Duntuck. And then it ended up for a long time where he was my high priest, which is really funny if you know him.
That is very funny. And, having lived with Jim and knowing him very well, that's very funny.
That's very funny, yes. So, and it caught on because of me being a GM, but it really actually drive back to just a conversation in the lunchroom at as Duntuck Community College. So
that's where I met Matt too.
And Matt pretty much introduced me to everyone. So that's where most of the people I know in this part of the nation I met through Matt, or because I met someone through Matt. Now the other thing too is once I know someone's beliefs. Going back to world building, once I know someone's beliefs and norms, I start coming up with customs. Like, how do you shake hands? Do you not use your left hand when you touch someone else? Is throwing your shoe at someone an insult or a compliment? But I drive those off of the beliefs that they have.
One of my favorite twisted customs was like, which is to say, taking what would be a custom that comes out at one way and twisting it for the sake of fiction, was in Dune when they first meet the Fremen in like this. It's almost like a treaty at a table. The Fremen representative spits on the table, and at first everybody is super offended, but Paul Atreides, having studied the Fremen a little bit at this point, but this is before he went, native. He recognized that this was a great compliment because for the Fremen,
sharing any liquid,
any water, so when you for the Fremen, water belongs to the tribe. So when you die, they literally annihilate, crush up the body until every last bit of fluid is devoid of what's left of your remains. And that goes back into water catches. It obviously gets filtered, but it gets filtered to its base form, just water. So if somebody gives you spit, it is a great compliment because they are sharing a vital resource in their
Which culture. Is not only theirs, like you said, it's the tribes.
Right.
And they're an interesting study because of that, because their world was so dry that they had technology to help filter the water out of every bodily fluid. Every ounce of H2O would be needed to be recycled. And because you can't run out or you die.
And they also do not cry for their dead, and that was also a very significant thing for them, welcoming in Paul Atreides because like a guy died. Actually, if I remember correctly, he was the one that killed him. And the only reason he cried was not because he was like, oh, I really cared about this guy. It was because it was such an emotional thing. He'd never killed a man before. And he was and I interpreted it as him kind of being like in shock. He was very young. He was like a young teenager, and it made him cry. And they were like, oh my gosh, he gives water to the dead. Like, that's how much he cares. That's how much he loves. He loves so deeply that he shares water with the dead. And they were like, wow, this guy's awesome.
But, but that leads to an important point too, where it's the shared experiences, the things that the people interact with, which form their beliefs and norms, which then inform the customs, how they act, and develops the way they speak. The sounds. I'm not going to get into the phonology of it, but sounds are something that just get used. But the way they use them, in what order and stuff, that's what becomes important. I do even I have one culture group that won't use a specific consonant because it was the beginning of the word, which went to the rivals who they hated so much that they banned a consonant from their lingua from it.
Boy, they're vengeful.
They are vengeful people. It's the gnomes that actually have given them a consonant.
Okay, so I imagine it's anti-Dwarven.
Yes.
Okay.
And
if you guys haven't heard episodes where we talk about the differences between the gnomes and the dwarves,
the Let's Build with the Gnomes was one of the most fun episodes, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say we did do a build episode on it, and it's fantastic. And I just find that culture fascinating. So you guys should definitely take a look at Jeff's gnomes. Mm-hmm. We do have more than one episode that talks about. And the final thing I always look at is religion. And I look at very broad stroke. Do they believe in, and typically the more tribal, the more likely they are to either be like animist or pantheon based, or a combination thereof, where they believe in, the minerals of the world, or begs like local, varying power spirits, some of which could be called gods. And so you can kind of call it like a pantheon, but it's a little different because you more worship the rock because it is connected to the god than the god which is symbolized by the rock. But that's getting into details which really kind of go beyond the scope of the episode. But the idea is I start to think about how they look at religion, and a lot of the stuff too, as I'm going into customs, it's like, you can at this point sort of determine what types of governments will come out. There's always an authoritarian version, obviously, but the idea is, are they going to lean like more towards a republic form of government, which was very common in like the Latins, the Phoenicians, and the German tribes, all kind of had a more republican form of early government. Where the Greeks had democracy, but they also had post Alexander monarchies, which they kind of adopted from the East. And so, but these things kind of will formulate in areas, but then they start to spread and intermingle. But early on, you can kind of tell if you have to all work together to survive, and there isn't a huge differential between the really powerful and the weaker. It's going to be more of a Republican kind of based system where they'll probably have a few elected people to make the decision for everyone, or a democracy where you all live so close together that maybe it's important that a lot of people have a voice, or maybe all of them in the case of all of the citizens of Athens, just exclude 96% of the population, but anyone who's a citizen at least gets a vote. Well, the thing that I find it funny that you get to religion last, because I find if I'm going to do it, I go to religion. I tend to lean towards religion first.
Well, my thing is, for me to make a religion, you could do it either way. It doesn't matter the order of doing these things. For me, it works better to start with the beliefs and customs, because to me that informs everything. And I personally struggle more figuring out what the beliefs and norms are and the customs if I don't have them in place and go, okay, now I need a custom of, like for the Bedrachum, I know I needed a custom of hospitality that would happen because it was so important to the culture. And if I had started the other way and I had built the pantheon out, I might still have it. But the problem is the religion, and this is why religion and culture are really reflections of each other, and
Definitely.
religion probably grows out of the culture, but then, it very early becomes important and starts informing what the culture will then turn into. So they start to feed off of each other once they exist. But the way you build them is kind of for me is always what comes to you first, and it's remember, these things aren't checklists either. You don't need to cover everything. You just need to create enough of a pattern to where when you go back to it, you and look at a few different patterns, one for language, one for religion, one for customs, one for beliefs and norms, you can kind of get an idea of what the people are like.
I wish I had all this, because I had built up something for the Enotian culture that the island people in your world, and I cannot find the documentation on it. I think I lost it when I moved.
Was that your sub-Bedrachum culture with the miracle death boy in there? Okay.
Miracle death boy. Yeah. Yes. Big fan.
But remember that, and this is really the long of it, right? It's like you can go through all of these areas and create patterns, and you can even start adding some details if you need it. But remember, you're going to either derive a bunch of cultures from this, or you're going to sit there and then start to fill in details of the culture you're working on. That's kind of how I use a culture group. Sometimes there's only one culture that comes from it. But, if I have the patterns and ideas of where they came from, and this is like them, like super early Stone Age, pre-agriculture, what was important to them then, I can just, start pulling out, like, maybe certain things go away because they're no longer important, but the core of them, there's a core and soul behind the details, so you can use it as a way to check yourself, as you're building stuff, to say, does it make sense, and do I have enough exceptions, because there always has to be exceptions to every rule to make it feel real, or else humans will be confused. But now, the short of it is, look at what's interesting to you about cultures. Create just enough, like I said, to get a taste of it. Whether it's the list of things that I use, or it's a list that you've come up with after reading National Geographic one too many times. Whatever it is, maybe it's the dress really informs you. Food could easily be on that list.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And for me, it's a norm. You eat grain, but if you look at food first, food probably drives all those other things. So because there's always the acquisition of food early on that sort of drives cultures. Now, but just get enough. And even when you're building out the culture, leave wiggle room for yourself. Don't have every aspect nailed down before you start using it, because you're going to feel like that you have a religious text informing you on how the culture is, even if it's not been released to people, because you spent so much time developing it. And sometimes when you go back to something, it just doesn't make sense. So go back, leave yourself wiggle room each time, so later on you can change it. It's like one of the biggest ways I leave wiggle room is when you hear about a culture from someone in my world, it's from their perspective. And the further away they are, the less contact they have will inform on the correctness of the information. And so sometimes you can meet someone of that culture and they're completely different, or you can say, well, that was a stereotype of this culture, but it really isn't reflective of the individuals within it. So that's kind of the way I like to play with it. As like, you can't trust what people tell you in my world, because I'm a fiction writer, so I make them lie. And they have biases, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. And but I like to use it as a base to develop the details, because once again, like I said, it's kind of like when I create rules for a world. It's like I like something to go back to sanity check myself, to go, does this make sense from someone coming from here? And sometimes it doesn't, and you can say, but it's okay. It's, you're not creating a law here. You're creating a guide for you to check yourself as you're developing more in-depth content. And then finally, well, I guess I just said this, but use it as a base when you develop other cultures, especially if you have a lot of cultures in your world. Don't have each of them be isolated from each other. Have multiple people using from a group. And some might even be really far away. And if you met them, in the time of your world, they might not even recognize it right away, but that they're related. But it's shocking, it's like one of the interesting stories about the spread of culture, and who knows how much reality there's to this. They found mummies in ancient China, like way pre-Qin. They found mummies there of people who, from the goods that they found on them and the composition of the human being, look more like someone you would have met in Ireland back in the days of the Romans than someone that you would have found near China.
Well, I mean, could that simply just be a case of, are you trying to point out that this is obviously someone that traveled across the continent?
Well, it wasn't. So, well, he probably never traveled that far in his life, but it was probably, a divergent groups of people moving in different directions. And over time, they start to blend in with who's there. Mm-hmm. And they leave behind. And there are Indo-European languages north of China, mixed into that sort of Siberian steppe region north of them. So it quite possibly could have been someone who was shared from the Celt group, which would be very controversial for me to say, because I really don't know. Or it could just be freaks of nature that got separated from the tribe who ended up just being in a really dry spot and got, and getting mummified. So maybe it was not even as significant as I think. So who knows what it was, but the thing is, people group, they migrate to where food is. And so vast distances, could show up people who have a similar base to their culture. But because of the specifics of that area, they will completely change who they are, and they'll completely sound different. They will completely speak differently when they meet in 1,000, or let's say 10,000 years. So, they won't seem similar at all.
I think the overarching point is that you're saying that no matter how separate cultures are, they still have influence on each other. And, it's very rare that you have something that's perfectly isolated. Mm-hmm.
And if you get down to the real brass tacks of it, if they're right on the development of human beings, and it was from a specific spot in East Africa, 300,000 years ago or whatever, it was probably all one culture group at one point, because of humanity almost died out. So it might have only been one culture group, but at some point, that's a little too far distant. Things will have changed so much that there's no similarities anymore. I like to think about 10,000 year back. Yeah. And now for the world-building task of the day, Michael.
I have one, but I'm going to read yours, and then I'm going to decide if I want to use it or not. Where do you have it? Do you have it listed here?
Yes, right near the bottom, right under world-building task.
I see real world. Where's the world?
It's right above it.
Oh, wow. So you wrote create a culture group. What I'm going to say is start a culture group and build the frame. I'm not going to say complete the culture. You might have all the cultures you need in your world, who knows? But if you don't, then go ahead and use this as a means to create the culture. If you do and you don't need to create a new culture, I'm going to say create the frame. Get accustomed with, this is like one of those things where let's say you do a given manual task day in, day out, and you're really good at doing it a certain way. And then someone comes along and they say, well, what if you did it this way? It's more efficient. And you're like, but I've never done it that way. And when I try to do your more efficient way, I do it slower. It might be slower until you get accustomed to using that method. Yeah. And then you realize it's twice as fast as a method you could also do really quickly. So this is one of those things where as you use things this way, you'll get better at it, and it will make your overall building faster.
Yeah.
So give this a try. If you don't build cultures this way, give it a try. If you don't like it, I'm not going to twist anybody's arm. But if it helps you make your stuff faster, that's one of the things that we want to help you do.
Yeah.
So
and I'm not a petty man. I'll let Michael take credit for that. Even though if you read the actual Worldbuilding Task, it says create a culture group framework in your world.
Well, you got this thing typed out all wacky sometimes.
Well, the formatting doesn't convert over well to the Zoom chat. I'm sorry.
Well, that's fine. Well, so we both get credit. You actually intended that,
and I said it.
But I said it.
Yeah, I'll completely share credit with you because I'm not petty. You jerk. And now for the real world task. This could be a tough one for certain people, and this is a huge problem for me. Learn to say no. And you don't have to be a jerk about it like Michael. You can, the thing is, some people are really good at saying no. Other people like me are horrible because you want to say yes because you want to help people and you want to make their lives better. The problem is if you always say yes, you never have a chance to get to what you need to do. And, and obviously be more careful in circumstances, if it's your spouse, have a discussion as you're saying no. Don't just say no. But even at work, sometimes, it doesn't always make sense to say yes. And sometimes saying no will make you a better worker, even at work. Just understand to use it judiciously, but use it to make sure that you get the core things that need to get done. And that includes your world building. You have to say no sometimes. I'm sorry, I can't go out and watch Avengers Endgame, which I have.
I still haven't.
Also, I'm going to completely spoil it for Michael.
Please don't.
But go out and say no to and I forget who said this, but they're like, if someone comes up to you and you're trying to get a bunch of stuff done, the best productivity hack that this person gave me, who I feel bad I can't remember who they are, is say no unless it's a hell yes. Unless someone tells you, it's like, hey, can we do this? If your brain doesn't go hell yes, say no. And take time if you're a nice person to say no. But sometimes if it's not, I'd say that sounds cool. Just right now, I don't have the time to do that. Can we do it later? And think about one, is it really essential for you or your family? Sometimes you have to say yes to things you don't like. This isn't saying no to things that you just don't want to do. This is saying no to things that aren't essential.
And sometimes that no can simply be a not right now, thank you.
Yeah. It could be, there's in my productivity, I use the Trello board to control my life. But I have a someday list, and they're awesome ideas that I wish I could do, but they're not a hell yes because I either don't have the stuff to be able to do it now, or I don't have the time to do it now because I have other things that are fundamentally more important. And when you learn to say no, you can actually get things done that you want to do, whether it's write a novel or create an RPG or a supplement for an RPG or create a new really cool game for your friends. Whatever it is that you want to do, if you're struggling to get there, think to yourself, do I say no to things that aren't essential that I don't need to do now, but I always say yes? Oh, I'm going to sit down and finally get time to world build, and I get a phone call like, do you want to come over? Of course I want to come over, but can I do it now and get what I need done?
Make commitments, basically. Like if you're committing to doing some world building, then commit to some world building. The other thing I'd actually like to add to this is also learn.
Yes, go ahead.
If you have not learned this yet, and it took me a long time to really learn this, and I'm still not great at it, learn how to ask for help and learn how to accept help. Like
that's actually maybe even a better version of that. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I have learned how to ask for help. I have learned how to accept help. What I still struggle with is if I ask for help and someone can't give it to me or won't give it to me, I get really upset because I'm like, don't you realize what a big deal it is that I am asking for help? So if someone gives me even a little bit of hem and haw, I'm like, all right, screw you. I got it. Never mind.
Mm-hmm.
I get real indignant about it. And that's
whatever you say.
That's something that I still work on.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know how to ask for help, and I'd like to think I'm pretty good about accepting help now. Mm-hmm. And that's something that can be really powerful and life changing. And for some people like me, it was a long process to learn that.
Yeah.
Like no, I know it's really heavy, but I got it. No, I know I got all this stuff, but I want it done a certain way, so I'll do it.
Now, I do have to change the real world task for the next episode, which that was exactly it. So.
Well, and I find this is something that, especially like I was talking to one of the guys at church the other day. He's part of the property committee, and he takes on a lot. So I was asking him if he had more than one person that he works with in the property committee, or if he was the only person that did all the property management. He's like, no, there's a few different people. I'm like, do you delegate well? And he's like, that is something that I work on. One of the things, if you have a lot of responsibilities that you have to take care of, and you have the help that you can ask for, you have to understand that when you do ask for that help, sometimes that means letting go of that task and accepting that task may not be done the way you want it done. It may not come out the way you want it to come out, but it'll still get done by that other person. You have to accept that, because if you cannot, you are always going to be dissatisfied with the outcome of things, and you're always going to want to be in control, and you're not going to be able to do everything. And thus, you won't have the time to get back to the nerdy stuff that we love to talk about.
Yeah. I'm just going to say no to get back to my point.
Yes.
I think you had like 3 real world tasks in there as well, too. But
they all feed into no really well, though. Yeah. They feed into no really well. So one made me think of the other.
I hope you all have a good week. We will talk to you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.